One. All right, Daren. So the first thing I like to ask people, kind of generic, take in whatever direction you'd like, but when you think back to your childhood, what are the things that really stand out to you?
Oh man, baseball. That's pretty much all I did growing up. I played baseball with a lot of like really good players, like David Murphy. I grew up playing with him. And played all the way through high school, played in college at Texas Lutheran. And so, really, when I think about my childhood, well, it's weird because that and computers. So I have two older brothers who were always really big into computers, and I was always kind of the black sheep because they always did really well in school, and like I was really more into sports and stuff like that, and they were always in like the marching band, and I wasn't into instruments or anything like that. But so they were always playing computer games and video games, stuff like that, and so that always kind of resonated with me. And so, I would play baseball, and then I'd come home and I'd play around on my computer. And so a lot of my friends said I was weird or a nerd, but I think it ended up working out pretty well for me.
Yeah, I think you've parlayed that into something. So, like, I loved being on the computer when I was younger, and we're more or less the same age. I think you're a little bit older, but we had the same opportunities. It's not like you grew up without the internet and I grew up with the internet. The internet was a thing for both of us, and I think like technology throughout my childhood and yours was, again, more or less the same. So I enjoyed being on the computer, but like I could install, like if I got a computer game, I knew enough to like put the CD in and follow the prompts and install it. But like I don't know that I was advanced from a computer standpoint. So obviously with what you do now, you certainly are more than that. But were you like what was the introduction to really like becoming familiar with computers in a way that was more than just surface level?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. So I was probably in like second grade, and my brother, my oldest brother, he's 7 years older than me, and so I'm 38, so he's 45 now. He was like programming video games, right, and stuff like that. Like so, but he also bought a bunch of video games. And this is before like even like you could use a mouse. So like a lot of the games were pretty like you had to type everything you wanted to do. So I was like in second grade, and actually I think it really helped out my like vocabulary because so a lot of these games you had to like type what you wanted to do, like look at the mirror, or look at cabinet or something like that, and then it would give you a description. But like in order to load that, you'd have to go through DOS. You'd have to like type in a command prompt, and sometimes it wouldn't work and things like that. So at a very young age, I was like almost programming, but not really. And then, as I got older, I would start making my own computers and things like that. And then, my brother, my closest brother is 2 years older than me, works at NASA. And so he's like a genius. And, like he would always be doing crazy stuff on the computer. And like, I probably wouldn't get in it as depth as he did, but like, I would just kind of learn things here and there. And, so yeah, it's just I grew up very heavily around computers for sure.
So what was like? You do some pretty cool stuff with the computers and technology now, but like when you were growing up, what was like the coolest thing that you were able to do involving a computer?
Well, the first thing I think about is like I had an emulator, and like I would play like. I could download every Nintendo game, and all my friends would come over, and they'd be like, "Man, look at all these Nintendo games you have." And so, like, we'd like hook up controllers, and we'd play like every Nintendo game, Super Nintendo games through an emulator. And then, like, probably like my junior or senior year, I started like coding a little bit, and so I started making just like little websites, and I like one that like I'd put my high school baseball stats on and things like that. So yeah, that was probably like one of the more nerdy things I was doing like at that age.
All right. So, and did you have friends? I know you said like your friends were like, oh, like, you're a nerd or whatever for doing this, but like, did you have other friends? Like, I think for me, some of my interests were amplified or hobbies were amplified, because you had friends who were interested in the same things, and like subtly you kind of push one another towards those interests. So did you have any friend? I know you had your brothers, but did you have any friends who were kind of like rolling with you on this, or were you just kind of doing your own thing from like a friend standpoint?
Yeah, no, not really. Yeah, and still to this day, really, like I still hang. It's kind of funny. I still hang out with like the same guys, but like they all went off into like business or marketing or something like that, and like I was the only one who I was a computer science major in college, and yeah, it was just my brothers and me, and then like all my other friends like were all from like baseball or basketball or football or something like that. So yeah.
Now we've chatted before about your and you mentioned David Murphy. So David, obviously strong connection to the Rangers. Grew up down in the Houston area. So you played with him. I'm just curious, what was the extent of your relationship, and what was it like playing? I think it's always cool, like what were they like back then? So David Murphy was a good player on some really, really good teams, carved out a nice major league career. Was it like, hey, this guy's a big leaguer when you were playing with him growing up, or was it not so apparent?
No, he was. It's totally apparent. So I mean, I played t-ball all the way up till 8th grade. Probably, I ended up going to a different high school, so we didn't play in high school together. But yeah, I mean, he was always the best on the field. There was never any doubt. He just like you could just tell he was on a different level than everybody else. I remember I played first base, and he's a lefty, but he played shortstop on our. Man, I don't even know if it was like 8-year-old or 9-year-old, and everybody like on the team, I was never scared when they threw the ball, but like when he played shortstop, it like petrified me because he threw it so hard across the diamond. I was like, oh man, don't hit it to him. But yeah, I mean, he was always, and the thing about David, he's like a really nice guy. Like, it's hard to relate to some people like that. When you see him on TV every day or whatever. But I mean, he was always really grounded, and he's just like a super, super nice guy.
He's like too nice of a guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Texas Lutheran, you played baseball. When you went there, now, like for people who aren't familiar with the baseball scene, in the NFL, typically your NFL players are coming out of major colleges. NBA, same thing. You got a few who kind of slip through the cracks, but baseball is very different. You got kids coming from high school, coming from 4-year colleges. You got the JUCO kids. So when you went to Texas Lutheran, was playing beyond that still a thought, or was it, hey, I love baseball, I'm obviously good enough to play at the college level, let's have 4 more years of fun, but I'm also going to be really focusing on whatever that next step might be?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any like ideas of being in the pro. I was always small. I was an outfielder, so I think weighed like 100. I still only weigh like 155 pounds, but like I mean, like I was all state like in high school, and I loved playing baseball. So like that's like all I did, and I wanted to play in college, and I had a few other opportunities, but Texas Lutheran was like the one school that offered computer science and that wanted me to play. And so yeah, I mean, I decided to go there, and I'm glad I did. I had an awesome time there, and yeah, I mean, like I never had any like great visions of being in the pros. I just, I really loved the game, and I just wanted to play 4 more years. And if every now and then a D3 guy will sneak through and make it to the show. It's extremely rare, but you never know.
All right, so you had a career in law enforcement. Now, I don't know that you were, knocking down doors or kicking doors in or whatever, but how did that all come about, and what was what were your responsibilities? How would you kind of characterize that part of your life?
Yeah, that part of my life was awesome. So after I graduated college, so my brother I actually took over his job. I worked at the Harris County District Attorney's Office, and he was switching jobs to another career, and he asked if, I wanted to interview, and so I did. And it was kind of funny. So, like, when I got there, I was like, so how do you look up, like, say somebody's in jail or whatever, how do you look them up? And it was just, like, super antiquated, like, green screen, like the old DOS prompt. You'd type someone's name in, and then, like, it was really hard to find somebody. And I was like, wow, this is, like, how the criminal justice system works. And so I started thinking, like, what are some good ways that, like, we can, update this to, like, the 20th century. And so while I was working there, like, what I did was I basically took all these old DOS prompt screens and turned it into, like, a web page where you could, like, pull up a criminal history with all their mugshots, with all their offense reports, with all, like, the videos that are associated with the case, where, like, all that information previous to this web page would probably take upwards of, like, 6 to 8 hours to just, like, grab all this information. And basically I, like, whittled it down to, like, 10 seconds. So it was, like, almost a revolutionary thing in Harris County. And so, yeah, I mean, like, but, my boss gave me freedom to do whatever I wanted, like, look at all the technologies I would want. And so it was kind of like a dream job for me. So, yeah, I mean, I did that for, like, 10 years. And, yeah.
So did you, like, when you were doing that, you mentioned it was a dream job, like, did you kind of think, okay, like, this is going to be my career path? Like, I'm going to make way kind of the law enforcement side and I'm going to continue to grow? Or did you always know in the back of your head that at some point you wanted to maybe shift gears and enter a different field?
No, like, I honestly, yeah, I mean, I really liked it there. My boss was, like, super nice and was an awesome guy. And, he was the CTO of the district attorney's office, so I just figured, like, we had a really good relationship, and, he was getting close to retirement, so I was like, maybe I'll just, like, slide into his role. And so, yeah, like, I kind of thought, like, that was going to be it, and, I'd just hang out there, and, yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any, like, ambitions to get into sports. It just kind of like organically happened, which is kind of wild, actually.
What do you, like, before we get into that, because it is kind of crazy how that all unfolded. When you were in the law enforcement job, if you're thinking, like, okay, I'm going to keep climbing the ladder, like, what was I don't know if end goal is the right phrase, but, like, what did you, once you went down that path, like, what did you, like, kind of aspire to be ultimately? I just, like, with no familiarity of that, of that industry really, and certainly not the path that you were kind of carving out. Like, what would it be like working in Langley or something? Or, like, what would be like I don't know, like, in your head, were you like, man, one day I want to be this?
Well, at the time, like, I was kind of like, well, let's just see how far this application can go. The criminal history one I was working on. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if I, like, ever had, like, a super end goal. It was just cool. It was a fun project to work on. So, like, I would go to work and, like, it was a fun, like, just, it was a good atmosphere and it was fun to work on. And so, like, I really didn't think that far in advance. Like, I think I was kind of just happy with what I was doing. I didn't really have, like, a goal to go work at, like, the NSA or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, like, it was just kind of like, we'll see where this takes me down the line, really.
Okay, so baseball. How did what is the origin story of your entry into baseball?
Yeah. So when I was working there on the side, I was sitting on my couch. I remember it vividly, actually. It's probably like 7 years ago, maybe 8. I was sitting on my couch, and I was watching a spring training game, and they kept showing, like, pitch speed and movement and things like that. And I was like, how like, where's this data coming from? So I started researching, like, where that data was coming from and if it was accessible and stuff like that. And it come to find out it was like MLB puts out all this like awesome pitch information, and you can, I mean, if you know how to do it, you can go out and you can grab it all and do whatever you want with it. And so while I was working in the DA's office, on the weekends and at night, like I started grabbing all this information. I started putting it in a database, and then I started answering questions that like I was interested in, like, you know, who throws the fastest fastball, and like who has the most movement on their pitches, and who throws the most curveballs and things like that. Like things as like a baseball player, like what would I want to learn? Like where do certain players hit the ball, spray charts and things like that. And then I started thinking like, what type of visualizations would I want to see if like I was in the pros? Like where does this pitcher, where is tendencies and things like that. And so I started developing these things, and then I was like, well, not like I might as well create these so other people can see it. And so, you know, I started Baseball Savant. I just, you know, I didn't have any like serious ambitions to get into sports. I was like, well, I'm doing all this work, so I might as well like try to make something cool and see if what people think about it. And so that's kind of where it started. And yeah, it was kind of crazy like that. You know, I didn't really ever think I would get into baseball, but it got really popular really fast, and it was pretty unexpected.
Okay, so when you were all right, so you had this available data. Were other people at that time? I mean, obviously now the utilization of data in baseball has grown tremendously. You were at the forefront of it. Did you feel like it all? I mean, I guess this was a side project, so maybe you didn't feel this way, but like, was there in your head like a race with unknown competitors to like put stuff out there first, or was that not at all in your head? I don't know if that makes sense what I'm asking, but like, were you thinking like, hey, like there are other Daren Willmans out there who are trying to do this, and I got to make sure I get this stuff out there first? Or was it just such like a passion project and not anything at all you thought could turn into something that never really crossed your mind?
No, that never really crossed my mind, to be honest. Like, I was kind of also using it as, like, ways to learn new technologies. Like, I was using, like, a whole different platform than I was at work. So, like, I kind of, like, used it as an opportunity to learn, but at the same time doing baseball. And, like, yeah, there was, like, you know, there's Fangraphs and Brooks Baseball, and they all kind of do a similar thing. So, like, I think, you know, I would look at those websites, and I was like, what can I offer that they're not offering? And so that's kind of the tact I always took. So those websites don't have a whole lot of visualizations. And so, like, that was kind of, like, where I was, like, aimed at. I've always had, like, a passion for that type of stuff. And so I kind of, like, took that angle at it. And so, yeah, like, and then I started a Twitter account, and then, you know, people started following me. And so, like, I would get a lot of good feedback from other people. So it kind of organically grew through there. So people would be like, hey, I really like your site, but it doesn't have this. And so I would add it, and they'd be like, oh, that's awesome, thanks. And then somebody else would ask for something, and I would add it. And so that's kind of really how the website grew in popularity. And, like, you know, it was kind of like almost like a community project that I would do.
What were some of the early challenges when you were just trying to kind of build this from the ground up?
Yeah, well, the biggest challenge was handling the traffic. So not getting too technical into it, but like all the, you know, I would pay for it all myself. So like the server, I started off paying $10 a month, and then I got to 20, and then I got to 40, and then before I got hired by MLB, I think I was paying like $90 a month just for hosting, and it was fine. Like because you know it's no different than like playing around a golf or something like that, like once a month. That's the way I kind of looked at it, because I was having fun doing it. My wife would probably say otherwise, but but yeah, like I mean that was probably the hardest technical challenge. And then like there's a lot of database things you have to do to make sure that like it's performant, because the queries that people run are actually pretty like they have to be optimized, and like so the way Savant's kind of set up is like particularly the search. You can kind of search any stat you can ever imagine in baseball, and that's like not. It's really hard to make that something that like doesn't crash the website. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so this starts as just a passion project, and then it becomes more than that. At what point in the process did you realize, like, wait a second, this little side hobby might grow into something that is much bigger than what I could have anticipated? And by that I mean sort of leading into your role now. But like, what was that, or what were those moments, and how did that all unfold?
Well, it started when I started getting emails from teams. I probably was asked to interview for 14 teams, maybe more than that. Luckily, I was in a position, like if I was like right out of college, I would have taken the first one that reached out. But luckily for me, I had a good job at the time, because teams, working for a team can be awesome, but like teams typically you work super long hours. The pay isn't particularly well. There's just a lot of like it's hard to have a good work-life balance. And at the time, and it started happening, my wife was pregnant, and I know she wouldn't want to move to, say, like Tampa Bay or Toronto or something like that. And so, like, I really started to notice when the teams started reaching out. MLB hadn't reached out yet. And so I interviewed, and I had a good bargaining chip. So I was like, listen, I can't move from Houston because we're about to have a child, and my wife's family's here, and so like I'd leverage that, and so like I turned all those teams down basically. I did interview with the Rangers, and I'll say this, that like I almost took the job with the Rangers. It was basically like between MLB and the Rangers, and I mean, that was one of the toughest decisions I had to make, because the offer from the Rangers was extremely good. It was just the MLB one was a little better because it was 100% working from Houston, and the Rangers one was a little bit more travel. But yeah.
Do you have a desire at some point? I know. Gosh, the way this story is unfolded, it's an example of how not. You can't really plan for these sorts of things, but like, would you like to work at the team level at some point, or is that something that as you've learned more, that maybe you would like to do less than you at one point would have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to be like the perfect opportunity. Just knowing what I know now about working for a team, like I think it would just have to be like the perfect opportunity, and and I don't even know what that is, to be honest. Like, I don't know if it came down to that. Like, I think I would want to transition to more of like a player ops type of person, where like I wouldn't be like developing code. So someone, somewhere where I could actually potentially maybe become a GM or something like that, not just a developer in their analytics department. That's the type of role that like it would have to be, I think.
I'm curious. So obviously teams reached out. Have you had players reach out to you at all? Curious. I mean, I know some players look at, all the information and they scoff at it, but it seems like, with each passing year, more and more players are either becoming open to it, or the ones who aren't are getting phased out because they're retiring and they're getting older. Have players ever reached out to you to try and learn more, or just learn how to utilize some of the information that you have, or do they usually just go straight to the people? Now teams, for people who aren't as familiar, it used to be that teams didn't have anyone who maybe had this level of expertise. Now teams have, departments full of people that I guess players could turn to. But have you ever had any interactions with players on this sort of thing?
Yeah, all the time. It's a little weird, actually. I think even teams are a little secretive with their data to players. Even I think they only show them what they want. That I'm sure if they ask, that they will. But I've had players reach out with questions that I was like, why don't you just ask your front office this? So I'm not sure where the disconnect is on some teams. Between maybe they just don't want to give too much data, and if they give it to one player, they're going to have to give it to them all. But yes, a lot of the players that do reach out are typically free agents. There's a particular pitcher I'm thinking of right now that he has reached out to asking questions about his pitch movement and various things about maybe he can improve on in the off season, release points and things like that. And I've also had coaches reach out too, which is kind of cool. There was a coach last year who I had tweeted out a stat, and he goes, "Hey, can you check the previous year of that?" And it was about pitches, first pitch swinging, and he wanted to prove himself right. He was like, I feel like we're swinging more this year. What was ours last year?" And so I gave it to him. He was like, "Yep, that's what I thought."
Are you seeing or feeling more people accepting of? Okay, if you were to walk into a proverbial room, a hypothetical room, do you feel like you're more welcome now than you were maybe when this first started? It seems like more people want to have these conversations with either you or someone else versus when you kind of first got into this?
Yeah, I mean, I try not. It's weird because having played baseball my whole life, I feel like I have I feel like some teams hire just analysts, right? And they don't necessarily have any baseball knowledge, which is fine. They're probably brilliant minds. But I feel like I have a really strong baseball background. And I understand that you need to make this pretty simple. Having played with a bunch of baseball players, and like I was explaining earlier, my friends, they're not big into computers, so having somebody with a baseball mind that can explain these things and understand them is extremely beneficial. And so I try not to overwhelm people when I talk to them about it. Whatever some of these stats are now, we try to make them easy enough where anybody can really understand them if you sit down, talk with them about it. And that's why I think visualizations are super important, because you can show them, if you make the visualization simple enough, the zone chart or something like that, look, this is where he throws his pitches. I know it's hard when they're coming 100 miles an hour, but it's just something to give them just a little bit of an advantage when they're in the box. But yeah, so I think as time has gone on, they're certainly becoming they're easier to understand or grasp. But also I think exit velocity, for instance, I've always said exit velocity is going to be just like pitch velocity. You can't watch a game now and without the ticker at the top and knowing how fast the pitch was. Exit velocity is going to be the same way, and it's already almost there. It's going to be hard to watch a game and not want to look and see how hard a ball was hit. Is that an advanced stat anymore? I don't really think so.
Yeah, it's becoming way more common. I mean, I know at Globe Life Field now, all that stuff is, on the scoreboard, the new video board. They got all sorts of information, and I know that's pretty much the case. Without having gone to all the ballparks around the league, I know it's pretty much the case. I'm curious, Daren, one of the big conversations about the managerial role is whether or not you need to have played at the big league level or the professional level to assume that role. And we're seeing in other sports, I think you've seen people take on those positions successfully without that sort of a playing background. Do you think that someone with your background could have success as a big league manager, or and understanding that your background does include playing? I think it would be really tough personally for someone who has never really played baseball beyond like machine pitch to do that, but like you did play at a high level. Do you think that with your background and kind of your mentality, combining your understanding of baseball, but with the expertise on the analytics side, do you think that we're going to see that in the future? And do you think that that would be a successful path for a team to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, obviously you wouldn't start like going straight to the show or something like that, but yeah, I think you're already seeing that, right? Like a lot of teams are hiring these guys from college, like pitching coaches especially. Pitch design's like a huge thing right now. And understanding the mechanics, the biomechanics of all this stuff, like just all the different data points, like I think coaches are definitely getting smarter, and if like the old school, like watch the game with your gut, like analytics tell you a lot about the game, and I think it's going to be a nice balance between like understanding that and also knowing baseball, knowing the situation, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think in the future it's going to be like a steady balance between somebody who understands the game, who has played the game, not necessarily played it at the major league level, the minors or college, and always stayed around it, understands it, but also understands the data. I think you're going to see that a lot more for sure.
Daren, I'm curious, how do you, and I think if I'm not mistaken, like you either dabbled or at minimum considered taking kind of your abilities and transferring them to other sports. And I think I've read that you'd like to apply this to college baseball at some point, but where do you see the future of all this with other sports? I know that other sports are starting to grow in various ways when it comes to all sorts of information and utilizing stuff. But where do you see? Where do you see? I guess like the NFL, the NBA, like. Are sports from your whatever conversations and experiences, are they open to really growing in the ways baseball has grown, or is baseball just unique in its structure that it's always going to kind of stand above the rest?
No, I mean, NFL they're going through an analytics boom right now. I've always said they are ripe for an analytics boom. So they recently, like 3 years ago, started the next gen stats, which is RFID chips in the shoulder pads. I think the first year they only gave the team's data to that particular team, but just recently, maybe last year or this year, they started just giving all the data to every team. And you're noticing it, like teams are getting a lot smarter. I actually interviewed. Well, so I have another site like NFL Savant and NBA Savant. I started those before I joined MLB, and I still maintain the NFL one. Just I don't really do any. I'm not active developing it, but I just update the data. So I actually interviewed with a couple NFL teams, and I interviewed with a couple NBA teams when I was being courted. But yeah, I mean those sports, NBA's. I mean, they're as good as baseball, their departments. NFL is catching up, but I think they're going to catch up really fast. And it's all about, so NBA has something called Sports View. It's very similar to player tracking data, similar to baseball. And the NFL now has the same thing. So I think you're going to see very quickly that if a team doesn't have an analytics department, they're going to have one shortly. And if they don't, they're going to be left in the dust.
All right, last thing, Daren, I'm curious when you want to develop a new, whether it's a stat or a new element to the site or your research, what's the process for that? How does that? I mean, I guess at some point it starts with a thought coming into your head about, hey, it would be cool to know this. What's that process like?
Yeah, so I mean, I work with a lot of really smart people too. So it's not just me. Tom Tango, who's like the godfather next to Bill James of baseball metrics. We'll sit down with him. Mike Petriello is another one. And, you know, we talk about baseball, and we talk about the data that we see, and we kind of just, oh, this would be cool. So like last week we sat down with Nick Humley, and we were talking about shifts. So right now on Savant, and the way we display our shift stuff is basically like, is it a shift or not? And so now we're starting to take these individual components of a shift, like is he playing the line? Is he double play depth? Things like that. So we'll sit down, we'll try to bring in an MLB player that's been there, and kind of give us the terminology that they're using up in the big leagues, and then try to trickle it down to the metrics. So yeah, I mean, like, it's a matter of just sitting down, looking at what we have and what we're trying to answer. There's always got to be a question, right? Like, so what are we trying to answer with this metric?